Hey, Mark. Good to see you. Welcome to Forever Motoring.
It's a pleasure and good to see you as well across this extraordinary instrument, I think, called Zoom.
Yes, quite a vehicle within itself. So, this podcast is about what moves us and the ways that we move. And I always start with this question. What's something in your life that has moved you, or some memory in your life when you remember being moved? You can take that anywhere you like.
Well, it might sound corny. It is an experience that I first found I thoroughly enjoyed, and that was speed, or the feeling of speed. Whether that, I guess, probably would have been on a bicycle or something. Having discovered this, I can say, thing called speed, you want to go faster and faster. And of course, what then invariably unfolds is that the skill set doesn't quite keep up with that ambition to get more of it. But as I've got older, I've come to realize that actually the addiction isn't to speed per se. It's actually, in essence, it's an addiction.
An addiction to wanting to feel something
Adrenaline.
more.
It's adrenaline. Yeah. Your body produces this, I guess it's a chemical that you become addicted to, and you want more and more of it. And yeah, it's just speed is the thing that really has moved me, and it then comes in various ways, whether it's the sight, sound, smell that I associate with it, can all start triggering this body reaction of producing adrenaline. I want some.
That speaks to motoring in so many different ways. A reason for why we do it. And speed and adrenaline, you can't really separate it. Do you think it's this feeling of wanting to feel alive, or is it wanting to go somewhere you've never been before? Or
Oh, for sure. It's absolutely that. Is that there's lots of people put it together better than I, from Steve McQueen, Jack Kerouac. I can't think of them all now, but it comes down to, it seems to me, is the closer to death you get, greater you value life. And clearly, not being a very good rider of motorcycles, that's an experience that can be very familiar.
Yeah. What is it about that moment? I have my motorcycle license, but I'm also not a very good rider. But I definitely like the edge, right? Or this edge work kind of idea of pushing yourself to a place you've never been before. And for me, there's something about all of your senses are totally present and heightened in a way. Does that happen for you, where you feel?
Yep.
Okay.
Oh, for sure. It's where your, as you just remarked, all your senses is entirely focused, and bringing about that focus is also bringing about that, I'd say, surge of adrenaline, and gives this incredible sensation of, yes, I'm alive, as it were, where, and that can be found in the pouring rain when you've got to get home, etc., through to, I'll say, riding Mad Sunday at the Isle of Man. It can be found in all sorts of different ways. And of course, in the environment that I've lived most of my life, of metropolitan London, busy roads, the amount of speed may not be that high, but that total focus, because of traffic conditions, filtering through traffic, etc., that can produce just as much adrenaline, I'm sure, as flat out on a drag strip or across Bonneville. May not get quite the accolades, but it's the same sensation.
That's a very good point, because it does have to do with focus and attention too, doesn't it? I think in everyday life, it's easy to get distracted or think about things too much. But when you're in those situations, for example, on the bike, on the road near the Ace, which we'll talk about, you have to be present. Like, it forces you to just be in the moment, which is not always easy to do in everyday life, is it?
No, that's absolutely it. Absolutely. And you get very aware that if you don't focus, you won't survive very long.
Exactly. There's not much of a choice if you want to stay alive. And weirdly, in those moments, you realize you do want to stay alive, which is also part of why it's attractive.
Yep. At times you might be in a circumstance where you pinch yourself and think, good grief, as I just come through, that's extraordinary. Others may remark to you that they thought that's going to be the end of you, as it were, but you come out the other side.
Almost
So,
every rider knows that experience, don't they?
yeah, absolutely, absolutely. But on the other side of that same coin, something I can speak to with some experience, not of the latter years, thankfully, but it was some years ago that my brother worked it out when we were having a bit of a discussion as to who was the better rider, as it were. It sounds a bit glib, but he worked it out that I had spent 5 years in hospital when you add up all the crashes and things.
You
The,
mean
the
5
bulk of that
years
was
of
with,
days? Like
when you add them up,
every
when you add up the
whoa.
times, yeah, the amount of time. Appreciate today, perhaps, well, without doubt, medical science and whatnot has improved no end. So what might have been a month in hospital once upon a time, you might be there for a week now. So things do improve. But no, with one long spell I had was nearly 2 years with a pretty grim crash.
Oh
But I've
gosh.
got all the bits still. They all got put back together again, and bits of metal everywhere and whatnot.
You're all still together. Yeah. Do you wanna tell us about that or not? Where were you, on the highway or
Well, motorbike, that particular crash, very slow speed, and I just started to pull away from a pedestrian crossing, as they're termed, and to my left, a road joined I'm on the main carriageway, and as I'm progressing across that T-junction, a car just came straight out of that side road, just smashed into me, and it's very painful.
oh, that's
But
the worst. That's the thing everyone's afraid of, right? Because as focused as you
yeah,
are and as attentive as you might be and as in the present moment as you might be as a rider,
that's
you're also putting yourself in the situation where everyone else has to be present if you're gonna stay safe. Everyone else you encounter,
yeah,
which is that's a delicate
yeah,
thing, isn't it?
yeah. It really is a balance. Um, so I was fortunate to come through it with my limbs still in place, etc., and couldn't wait to get back on and do it all again, really.
Really? You didn't have any hesitation, just you were ready, you missed it. And why is that?
It's
Is
kind
it
of,
yeah.
why is that?
I just wonder, is it
I
been
guess
part
it's
of your
back.
life so long?
I get well, it's perhaps a bit of that, but I think it's back to that simple word again, already mentioned, addiction. You come to hate sitting in traffic. I want to whiz through it. That's it.
Mhm.
Addiction to adrenaline.
Yeah. I wonder about this relationship between people who ride and people who I wonder if there is a relationship between people who ride, people who love speed, cars, motoring in all its forms, could be planes too, or even just when you're a kid on the bike, wanting to take it up an extra notch than maybe your friends are. I wonder if these sorts of people like us are more prone to addiction in other ways too, negative ways.
Perhaps, but it seems to me it's likely to be less harmful than many other addictions. Thankfully, I didn't, I'm going to say, trip in a heroin or something like that in my youth. Um, so I guess I was fortunate there. And arguably, with the limited experience I have of the States, I love cars, old ones, new ones, from the modern Ferrari through to, perhaps in particular, sort of the hot rod culture that came out of America in the 50s and early 60s, then muscle cars. Love all that. But you can't really pursue that as an addict here in the UK because our roads are just too congested, and you've got to go miles out to be able to enjoy that vehicle and the performance it can produce. Whereas on two wheels, it's much easier to say indulge it in the urban environment. So I guess that's why I got pulled more. I've always loved the cars and had lots of different cars, but really the fun is on two wheels, not for me on in my particular environment on 4.
That makes sense, especially in London where the world is very different on a motorbike than it is on a car in
Yeah.
terms of your
Ab
agency and your power and what you can do.
Yeah, yeah. I
Sure.
do suspect on say in open road, I'm trying to think of, I'll say the PCH, in California, that or Mulholland Drive,
Oh
I
gosh.
have had the good fortune to ride up and down on a bike.
Oh wow.
But I can see where the appeal was with four wheels there. Absolutely.
Okay. Yeah, there's something about even there's something about being on the bike too though when you're in those kinds of places where you're in touch with that space, that beautiful space like the one you just described in California, for example. It's a little different than in a car though, isn't it? Or
Oh yeah,
yeah.
I'm sure. And I think that one of the terrific connections I have of being in California and riding at PCH. It's some years ago, 2000 and something, I don't know what. A dear friend had organised a ride from LA up to San Francisco, basically. And it's going to be over 2 days. There's a whole group of us all got together, and someone kindly loaned me a modern retro Triumph, the Bonneville type bike.
Oh yeah.
And there's quite a considerable group. We all set off, and it was torture. I can't think what the speed limit it is or was at that time, but it's all very slow.
Mm.
And as we got out of the metropolitan environment of LA, as it were, heading up the PCH, there's a guy, American guy, who was on an old Triumph Bonneville that was really scruffy and had oil leaking out of everything, engine, gearbox,
No.
suspension. And his attire was exactly as the bike, just his totally great. He pulled away from the rest of us. And yeah, the old red mist came down and it got to go with him. So off we went, racing off. And I'm sure you're familiar with what I'm about to describe, how they wind up taking turns in front of each other. Who's the maddest, the bends. And as we hit I think it's a stretch of the PCH where it's all canyons here, rising up and it's twisties up and then hairpin bend and twisties down and back up again. And he's come past me first, I think, standing on the foot pegs, doing a crucifix. So yeah, then I have to do it. I'll go in front of him and I do it. And then he does it standing on the seat and then
What?
I do it. We're doing all these nutty things.
On those curves there? On
Yeah,
the
yeah,
corkscrew?
yeah.
Oh,
Well, we're doing that with our hands free is when you're coming down them, not when you're
yeah.
going up. But then it got more intense, giving someone a throttle. And I shall never forget, and it was coincidentally, I'll tell you, it was my turn in front. It's just me and him, long way ahead of everybody else. And I can remember rising up to what I know is a hairpin that's going to go all the way around to the right, going back down into I'll say the canyon shoreline, as it were, then rise back up again. There's 100 yards away from that hairpin. All of a sudden, there's two guys in sunglasses sat looking directly at me because it's a helicopter that's come up the cliff face.
No. Oh my gosh.
And
That
my
would be
eye
jarring.
go from the hairpin to looking at them. I think, I won't say the word, but it's a 4-letter word. Anyway, wobble round the corner and got round, go another couple of bends, and all the wind's been knocked out of my sails, is the expression. And then you get to this bit where you make a right. And then you can see for miles along as straight as the road goes down. You can see the Pacific on your left and the gentle rising of the ground up to the land up to the right. Miles and miles, this undulating road. And there's a sea of police cars ahead.
Oh no.
So it's now, whatever the speed limit is, I don't know, 40, 50 or whatever it is, poodle along there. I can remember passing the police cars and then looking in that mirror. And then one of them's lots of flashing lights and head. So I get pulled.
Oh.
And of course, the other guy merely goes riding past. Well, it was just quite getting involved. Don't blame me. And there's little old me. I'm dressed up, I'll say, a la Mr. Rocker. So I've got studded leather, the British whole white silk scarf, the open face helmet. And so the bike has got a Georgia number plate because the bike has been borrowed from Triumph, so like, officially lent to me. And as I'm pulling, I can't, with the crash helmet, with those open face and the scarf, I can't hear anything because it's such a snug fit. And I can remember getting on the bike, and this huge California Highway Patrol bloke, absolutely giant, he's got his hand on his gun, which for an Englishman, that gets my phone. And he's standing there, and I can see his lips moving, but I can't hear a single word he's saying. It was all rural California coast. Can't hear a word because of the helmet. And I'm trying to gloves off and unbuckle and pries this thing off my head. It sounds strange, but it's a very difficult helmet to put on and take off. But once it's on, it is really snug. Good. Anyway, took this helmet off and then unwrapped the scarf. And then I say, sorry about that, but I couldn't hear. And he's obviously taken in strange attire.
Your accent.
Georgia number plate. He now hears it. It's like, what on earth have I got here? And he asks for my papers, driver's license, insurance. The same sort of questions you get asked.
Yeah, they always ask. Yeah.
It's exactly the same, really. And I've got them in a little plastic thing, and I put them in the pocket. I can't find it. But she's got passport. It's got all my very important documents accounting for me being in America and why I'm on this vehicle. They're all in one little thing. Where are they? By now, everybody else is on the bike, so they're going past. I took the leather jacket off and I've got another little denim thing on underneath, and I'm going through that and can't find. So he's asking, when did you arrive? When did you land in the US? It was last Tuesday. Where did you arrive at LAX? When do you leave? On the second Thursday. I don't know the dates or anything like that, but I know I'm here. I've got to be back there. So yeah, now I'm feeling that. Then I feel, once I've got the jacket off, I can feel that the bag, the pocket lining, has come away from the opening.
Oh no! So it's moved down.
It's moved around to the back of the jacket, as it were. So I get these things, given them, and I've got my UK license, which is a very old one, and they were their paper with no photos on. Modern UK ones now are like little cards with photos. Because I've never had cause to replace it. If I replace it because I've lost it or I've changed address, for instance, then I'd get one of the modern plastic ones with a little photo. Now, because it doesn't have a photo, I've also got what's called an international driver's license, which you may or may not see, which is like a book.
I've had to have one of those here before.
With a photo in. And basically the guy's never seen either of these sorts of things before. It's like, what? And basically he gives up in the end, it seems to me. Because he then goes on to saying about how colleagues drive right. So it's obviously the helicopter's radio. Then he asked me what the speed limit was in California. And I hummed and hawed, and I knew it was 70 or 75. And I can't remember to this day. But I plumped for the right one, it seemed. And then I got a road safety lecture, like I didn't know it was dangerous. Really? But hey ho.
And that was it? He let you go?
That was it. That was it. Oh. Yes, I got away with it.
What was more of an adrenaline rush, doing the standing on the seat or getting pulled over by him after the helicopter?
It was the hand on the gun bit.
The hand on the gun.
Hand on the gun
that's
bit.
Scary.
That instant, but once engaged in conversation, I could see that he was giving up on
probably the accent, the charms in America.
It's like, what on earth? He's not a threat or anything. It's just a weirdo. That's, I guess, how he saw me, which was quite amusing.
I'm glad you got it through that.
Tell this tale now.
Do you remember the first time you rode with a group like that? Did you catch up back up to the group? I guess you did, but do you remember the first time you rode with other people?
Coffee shop and all that.
Yeah.
That's part of the buzz, actually, as well. I've got splitting hairs about the group ride. It's, let's all go down to where it is, Brighton, was in this instance, to San Francisco. So it's who's going to get there first, or as you find bits that stretches on that journey of exciting roads with bends and twisties and whatnot. That's where, like I say, perhaps it's a male thing, I don't know, but it's the old peacock. Who can do this best, or who's the maddest? Comes out in perhaps guys more than ladies. I don't know. So yeah, group rides that has connotations of different connotations for different people. But yeah, I'll say a bunch of you whizzing off somewhere, and who's going to get there first, or whose motor is going to pack up.
That definitely plays back into that idea of speed and getting the adrenaline racing. It's another way to do
Yes,
it, or to heighten the senses.
yep.
Can be. But so I want to talk to you a little bit about your early life. I want to know how you ended up with the Ace. But first, I want to ask you, what is the Ace Cafe for those few in the world who might not have heard of it?
Well, I guess the Ace, there's its history, screams, speed, thrills, and the taste, smell, sound, etc. And there's those that subscribe to that today, and where you can pursue that indulgence, track days at, whether it's here in near London at Brands Hatch, or it's going back to California, Laguna Seca, or somewhere, whether it's 2 wheels or 4 wheels, you can go to all sorts of places and indulge that interest. You can watch MotoGP on TV. You can watch Formula One on TV. It's not a Ferrari hat. You can buy the hat or whatever. But there's nowhere that's, I'm going to say, could be regarded as home. And it might seem somewhat even parochial to venture, because of the history of the cafe and the dynamic of London that gave rise to that history. Aces, it seems to me, represent a home for those with that interest. In the same way that I'll say British guys or English guys, and more particularly perhaps, will regard Wembley as a home of football. You can play it everywhere. You can play, every school has got I think America would call it a soccer pitch. But you can play it anywhere, everywhere, at all sorts of different levels. But there's only one place that's regarded as home, and that's Wembley. And I think it's a similar vibe, as it were, around Ace.
That's what I've heard from people too. You bring up these places in sports where those places almost feel sacred, or like you would do a pilgrimage almost to go there or something. Is there something like that with Ace?
I believe so. I do believe so. It certainly it is for, I'm say, speaking as a Brit, as a Londoner, it certainly is for my peer group and those older. And with the passage of time, I can see it means exactly the same thing to the whole sway of youngsters. Today, youngsters are turning up on e-scooters, they stand on
really?
electric bicycles. Yeah, we have all sorts of issues around that with police. Oh, they're illegal, blah, blah, blah. But yeah, kids are just buying the bit of technology that they can whiz about on and show off on, that they can afford and lay their mitts on. And there's whole sort of fashion things that seem to be spawning from that as a consequence. And yeah, I guess if I was 16, 18, that's probably the route I'd go, is sort of Nike or all the tracky attire, as it's termed, trainers. But most of these ones that I'm thinking of, that they're also wearing motocross body armour, the elbow pads, the chest and back protectors, and full face motocross lids with the big jaws and the peaks.
Oh wow! On an electric bike or on the scooters?
On both, on electric
wow.
scooters and on the electric, as in bicycle type bikes. So not thinking of
not motorcycle, electric motorcycle.
Per se, yeah, they're far too expensive. They're out of reach of most people, let alone 17-year-olds. So yeah, it's the ones that you can do about, I don't know. They certainly can't ride from London to Brighton on them. They can ride around in London on them, but they wouldn't never get to Brighton on them.
No, but they can get to Ace pretty well without
Oh
having
yeah,
to.
yeah. So I'm saying they start gathering up there and all that, showing off, doing the stoppies as they can do them on the e-scooters, and the electric bicycles, they can do wheelies as well. Whereas the scooters, they can't do wheelies.
And you see something similar in the energy that they have that you
Oh, it's
saw
exactly the
in the
same.
early
Yeah, it's
hiking
exactly the
groups?
same back through the
Okay.
ages. It's exactly the same as a 70-year-old ton-up in 1955 or a mod or a rocker in 65. Exactly the same. There's a whole sort of tribal culture evolves. There's a soundtrack to it. There's a dress code, I term it, and all that. The new age, new technology.
That's fascinating. Do you
Uh, so, yeah, the thing I miss, and it's is the sound. Seeing you on the screen here, yeah, large. Of course, that's uh, the modern way to consume sound. So Google knows what the youngsters on these e-scooters are listening to, but they're happy with that sound. Whereas I'm also addicted to the sound of an engine, whether it's 4-stroke or 2-stroke.
there's definitely something sensory about the, internal combustion engine.
But
It's not only the
that's what
sound,
I'm
it's
saying.
also the vibration, or it's a
Yep,
lot of things,
yep.
isn't it?
But that's what I'm saying with today's generation. They're often not, they're wired into something, so they're still getting a stimulus. It might be a totally alien thing to me, as it were. I guess it was no different to when, I guess it's as revolutionary as when records first came out. You
What do
could
you
have
mean?
sound.
Yeah.
Well, when prior to the advent of a disc being played on an instrument, you had to actually physically be able to
Oh,
go somewhere where someone played an instrument or you played an instrument. It didn't, with the advent of
I don't know. The record player, the
the record player, yeah, that changed everything.
yeah, that's true. I hadn't thought of it. It was almost supernatural or something to just
Yeah,
have a machine and the sound comes out that sounds like a band.
yeah. And then saying that same thing with the advance of technology, I was only reading a few weeks ago with all the concerns that rightfully people have today about Facebook, TikToks, and people walking around just going out on their phone all the time, and all the comments that one sees with the concern of it's affecting language, all has been experienced before with the advent of the telegraph, which is a riveting thing, seeing this article, which was saying about what was being published at the time. The people who were using the telegraph were overwhelmingly youngsters at college, sending other colleges, look at me,
That's funny. Like,
it's exactly the same comments were being made. It's destroying our language, it's et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So there's nothing new under the sun with just new technology. It is easily adopted by the young and not so easily adopted by people of my age group.
yes, just it's still a sensory experience, but it's different, and it's always gonna come with dangers, and when you're talking about the young people on TikTok and this kind of where we all walk around with our heads in our phones, it's an addiction too, in the way
Yep.
we were talking about addiction, right? Where you
Yep.
it's sensory stimulation and you're getting addicted to it. But it made me think about you mentioned, the Tone Up Boys and the mods and rockers. We should probably unpack that a little for some audiences, but they had similar like, people were worried about them too, right? In different ways, being too stimulated by this new technology and their lives literally sort of being in danger. Is that right?
More or less, yes. And certainly if ever you have opportunity to come to the cafe, as you go up the main stairs, would be metal stairs, there's a montage of newspaper headlines from the mid 1950s. And included amongst all the headlines is a large 4-foot high sort of image showing a kid, 14, 17, in a suit, a very particular style of suit of that era. Youngsters not into bikes or anything at that time, they couldn't afford them, weren't available or couldn't afford them. But it's that, I'm going to say, immediate post-war period where a generation of the advent of the term teenager is in that same period. There's this massive baby boom on both sides of the Atlantic. And that baby boom had work and a bit of money. In America, it had a bit more money than the kids over here. And we had, in this country, we had rationing up till 1953. because we were bankrupt, etc., as we still are in truth.
Oh, gosh.
But as things came off rationing, for instance, when cloth came off rationing, kids with a job would then go and have a suit made, and it'd be a new suit every week. And it was as much cloth as possible. So the jackets were very long, almost down to your knees, and flamboyant waistcoats, lots of embroidery. Thence rubber came on rationing. Rubber was a wartime, very important commodity. But once it came off rationing, people then put rubber to all sorts of other uses. So kids would be buying shoes with thick crepe rubber soles. They'd be, I got leather sole there, genuine crepe rubber. It's the latest, it's the newest. And this look, combined with long hair, greased back, was redolent of the Edwardian era. Long jackets and flamboyant waistcoats. And soon came to be known as a teddy boy because it looked Edwardian.
Okay.
And of course, these terms, I'll go on a bit more, ton up, teddy boy, ton up, mod, rocker, punk, hoodie, yardie, all these terms are terms of contempt given by society to the young.
Okay, they didn't name themselves these things.
No, they don't sit around going, oh, what should we call ourselves? That don't happen. But having been given a label, because they're bad, it's no good dressing like that, and all these young people, as soon as you've got a label, a kid goes, oh, I want to be one of them. Oh, I've got to throw my hair like this, I've got to get a jacket like that, etc. So it just feeds this desire to be a member of this dangerous group. And of course, with that tribe of that era called Teddy Boys, all of a sudden, seemingly out of nowhere, they had a soundtrack, courtesy a film called Rock Around the Clock. And when that was screened at the cinemas, and people went to the cinemas perhaps 2 or 3 times a week, at that time, this is really, we only had one two radio programs, both by the BBC, the Light program and the BBC. Didn't play rock and roll or anything like that. There were no clubs playing it. Didn't exist. And then this film came out, Rock Around the Clock. So kids going to the cinema saw that, and of course it opens with, who was it? I can't remember, Bill Haley. And all the kids get up from those seats and want to dance. Yeehaw, as it were. And then it's ushers, and that spawned what are termed by the press as the rock and roll riot.
Oh, really?
Punch up. And it's just kids want to dance. They hear the music, they want to dance. That's all it is. And then it's called the police, and they got to sit down, or they're thrown out. Oh, all about rock and roll. Utterly nuts. Teddy Boy is exactly the same, whatever decade you care to go through since. And of course, as income improves and bikes become available, and in America it's cars, the kids go out a few years on and buy the fastest thing they can afford. In America it's a car, over here it's a motorbike. And they do exactly the same thing on both sides of the Atlantic, which is go to the edge of towns. In America it's to the diner, here it's to the cafe, and Ace is still is a big cafe at the edge of London, as it were, at that time. Fast bits of road, no speed limits. And guess what? They race each other.
Yep, speed.
Carnage ensues, then outcry, something must be done. Speed limits, the police, etc., etc. So it's nothing new under the sun. But that early era of 2 wheels, the kids were called by the press, or identified as press, as just cafe racers. They weren't proper motorcyclists. They just raced from calf to calf, a mile up the road and come back. Just ton-up boys. And of course, as soon as those terms are used, the kids go, yeah, I'm a ton-up.
You latch onto it.
And
so those were terms the press came up with, even cafe racer?
Yeah,
wow.
Yeah.
I guess it's like that, right? You get labeled something and then you take it on.
That's it. That's all it ever is. And the change came from ton up to rocker. I've had similar look bikes and the black leather jacket with the move through the 50s into the 60s. There's this little gap where Elvis has gone in the army, Buddy Holly and that died in the plane crash.
Plane crash, yeah.
So there's this gap in rock and roll, as it were, and that coincidentally is a moment where British youngsters who've listened to rock and roll and have endeavoured to come up with their own sound to play rock and roll, but they can't get the sound because the guitars are the Fenders and the Gretsch's aren't here. They're not available here. The amps in America aren't available here. So they can't get that same sound. So it's a different sound. British rock and roll is a different sound. That's taken to a whole new level with that gap caused by the loss of Elvis going in the army and the plane crash. And that gap gets filled by a sound that's come to be known, and it was initially known as London beat, then British beat, and more famously, subsequently, Mersey beat, a beat always swing blue jeans, blah, 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 a very particular sound. But it's also as that teenage, again, the term in teenagers invented, along with this massive baby boom that comes, I'll say, of age in the 50s, the teenagers are getting to be a more significant marketplace. Sell records to them.
Mm-hmm. They got more money. They're buying things.
And of course, they'd be trading their records they get from America into places like the cafe. They put them on the jukebox, rocker, which is another draw for youngsters because they can hear this American music, which is theirs. But as you get into the 60s, there's a new sound coming from America, or having been discovered by Brits, who are bringing back R&B. And that chimes just at the time when goodness me, the laws have changed. So speed limits are coming, and L plates, the L plate law, originally for the British, if you were 17, you'd go to the post office, fill in a form. You've now got a provisional driver's license, and provided you displayed an L plate, you could ride any bike you liked. That changed, I can't remember, 63. So that you could still go and get your provisional license and L plate, but you were limited to a 250cc bike.
Okay.
Now, this is at a moment when films like the Dolce Vita and Italian was seen as the new cool. So it's frothy coffee, Italian suit, not one of those stupid long jacket things. It's Italian style suits, smart. And again, kids buying a suit every week, clothes every week. And the Italian scooter manufacturers realised that their scooters were under the 250cc and were spot on for the next generation. So they did a huge marketing campaign. And of course, that chimed perfectly. So new sound, new look, and got scooters. So typically, if you were 16 in, I'll say 1964, you're going to be buying Italian suit or Italian style suit. You're going to be listening to R&B music. You're going to get a scooter because it's the latest and the newest. And kids always seem to go on the latest and newest. Not one of them. They get a dirty black leather jacket and one of those oily old motorbikes. So that is...
Those were the rockers, right? With the leather jacket.
Yeah. But you've got huge numbers of youngsters got their own means of transports. At bank holidays, typically people in the cities would go to the seaside. And again, pre-World War II, they'd have gone in a coach or a train, a managed system, buy your ticket, sit there, hour later, you're at the seaside.
Right.
After World War II, that's gone. Kids have got their own means of transport.
More
So,
power for the individual to
yep.
move
So
as they want.
Easter in 1964, kids, yeah, what should we do? Well, let's go down from Londoners. It would be depending on which bit of London you lived in. You go to, if you lived in North East London, you go to Southend, directly east, about an hour from the Ace. You could go to Southend, or you'd go a little bit, you'd go through London down to Brighton. If you lived in South London, you'd either go to Brighton or to Hastings. They're all about an hour, depending on which bit of London you're in, about an hour away from London. So that is, you have thousands of kids descending on these towns, seemingly out of nowhere, and the town's going to panic. Oh my God, all these kids wandering around with nothing
And they're
to do.
coming on bikes mostly, on these different
On scooters.
on scooters, okay.
But in addition to that, you've got the guys on bikes going down who are typically a bit older. They start fighting amongst themselves, then police are called in, more and more, and that gets repeated. And it's there at this time that the labels are coined by the press, mods, shortened from modernist. And
The people on the scooters, the girls and guys on the scooters.
And the guys on the bikes, when they're listening to rock and roll, they're not listening to R&B.
Okay.
And from there on, that's the newspaper headlines of the Brighton, the modern rockers riots.
I love this connection between the music and the motoring and the style, and like it's all kind of cohesive, isn't it? It goes back to that sensory thing where what you're listening to and how you're moving can't really be disconnected. And it also makes sense that you would be connected with other people who are immersed in that same sensory experience.
Well, that's inherent with youngsters. That goes with the age group, it seems to me.
Yeah, it's interesting. There's always a kind of medium though, right? Like it's motoring, there's something you're doing together as a group. Either you're like the sports team you're watching and you're cheering, or the style. There's always some thing that is making it easier to connect.
You want to belong, sense of belonging. You want to belong.
Similar to this mods rockers or today maybe, I'm not sure. I guess I wonder over time if we were talking about how like these guys on the electric scooters today, it's a similar energy that you're describing with the mods rockers. All of these things are something similar, but do we always have to have some kind of opposite, like an opposite group in distinction to us? Has that something you've seen at the Ace? Has that changed? Or is there always this kind of...
Yeah, I think that is the case. I can't say I've observed it, but I think wherever you've got yin, you're going to have yang. And the Aces were, its ethos overrides, if you like, it's egalitarian, it's utilitarian. It seems to be viewed in that regard, as it were, and held in that regard.
That's what I wanted to get back to too, this idea. We were talking about sports places being sacred and these pilgrimages, and the Ace is kind of like that for motoring, isn't it? A place where all these different groups can go, and that dichotomy, that us against them thing, it's a little quieter there. When you go to the Ace, no matter which group you are in, you're there for the bigger picture of motoring.
Yes.
Yeah.
Though I'll use a car night. It's easier that, or it could be Harley night, actually, as well. Because there is invariably friction between demographics, and it's an age demographic rather than necessarily a vehicle one. So most Harley guys are the other side of 55. So on King of the Road, blah 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 blah. It's a different.
It's kind of like listening to a different kind of music or something, different atmosphere.
Yeah, or it's they say classic car night, where again overwhelmingly there's a particular there's a soundtrack that goes to it. There's a look, there's an age group, and of course, if you're 18 and you've got an R1M or something, and of course the guy's yakking about the car or the Harley, is like, oh,
doesn't quite fit, yeah.
Because the 18-year-old thinks he's impressing them, but he's actually pissing them off,
annoying them.
So you get it's like having a lap dog. Oh, it's a lovely little pet, But then when you've got a whole load of puppies, oh my goodness, it's a whole different thing.
Takes a whole different kind of energy then.
Yeah, I guess the role of my role and the ace is to manage that, space. Yeah, tonight.
And
So
how do you do that? By separating into different
yeah, so
nights
tonight
and
we know we're
yeah.
going to get a load of puppies. So so if you're an old guy, don't moan about the noise. And then going back to the guy nailing his R1M to death, it's if he pulls in, have a quiet word, or if he's not pulled in, have a quiet word with his peer group, because there will be a peer group, invariably a mate or two of his. Have a word, yeah, behave. There's time and a place, and tonight ain't it.
Wow, I bet you've learned how to negotiate all kinds of different
Oh,
personalities over the years.
yeah. And most get it. Most get it. Most get it.
Yeah, I guess that's what I'm trying to get at too. There's something about the space itself that people respect, keep them
17-year-old
separate.
knows that if he survives, he will turn into exactly the same as that big lump of 55-year-olds who have the same interest.
Over
Yeah,
time, the
yeah,
new comes and the
yeah,
older, but it's a similar, like as you were saying, it's a similar. The people are there for similar reasons, aren't they?
yes. And similarly, you're saying to the 55-year-olds, well, don't forget you used to do that.
Yeah, and maybe that's why they get annoyed
Yeah, yeah.
in part. And going back to the history of the Ace, it's basically been around since motoring. It was there in the 30s as just one of the early stops for people with automobiles. But then you mentioned the war; it actually got destroyed during the Second World War, right?
Yeah. The enemy at the time weren't specifically targeting the Ace,
Okay,
because
yeah.
it was as the railway bridges nearby, and coincidentally flattened the Ace. So Goering didn't send his Luftwaffe to come and get the Ace.
No, but it was connected to the roads, so I guess.
And all the 7 railway bridges right by.
And the bridges.
If they got those, that would have been a major problem. But they entirely missed. But
And then
interesting you say that the roadside motoring, because motoring per se absolutely changed society in that immediate pre-World War II period. Motor cars had been around from the turn of the century, the turn of the 19th into the 20th century, but it's only a very narrow section of society that had them in that Edwardian era. Post First World War, more are able to afford them. And that's the middle classes, it's not the working class at all. But motoring absolutely changed social mores.
yeah, before when you wanted to go away, you had to take the train and you were moved communally from A to B. And then now what you're talking about is where each individual can decide for themselves, whether it's with a car, on a bike.
Not just that either. I'm thinking of the social mores. If I was going to take you out, there would be a chaperone. Invariably be a chaperone. It wasn't a done thing. You might meet opposite sex at certain things, but the social, that all changed with cars being so accessible. I could ask you out for lunch and we'd drive to somewhere to have lunch. That didn't happen before the First World War. It happened from the late 20s, and in particular in this country in the 1930s. And build premises with this then new road network that had been built, the arterial road network, a forerunner of Britain's today's motorway system. This new road network, there was buildings designed as motoring stops for lunchtime traffic. So you have a table, and there were swish places. A lot of these were really swish places with architecture redolent of the great liners of that era. Often it's not buildings designed in that same style, the Aces on that ocean liner style. So you also had on those arterial routes to coastal destinations, huge premises built where coach parties stop for lunch on the way to that seaside. Now, so it totally changed, not just physically, it changed social, it was acceptably socially. And post World War II, where owning a vehicle became accessible to greater numbers of the working class, and in particular to this baby boom of teenagers. Indeed, it's a whole another social more that has changed. It's invariably a peer group thing. You and your mates are going to do something. A total transformation in a period of about 50 years. And the Ace was built in 1938 as a wholly new motoring concept, really. Nothing like it had previously existed, where you had a cafe, a filling station, a gas station, motor workshops, and motor showrooms. It was huge. The cafe was only an element of that.
I didn't know there were showrooms too. It was
Yeah,
really an event space, like a destination.
Huge. Absolutely huge on one of Britain's busiest stretches of road, on which there was no speed limits. All the traffic, which largely was truck going in and out of the Port of London, and then off up into the industrial Midlands and whatnot. And the road had been specifically designed, that is the North Circular, so that the heavy truck traffic didn't go into the city, because until the advent of the North Circular Road, the trucks going in and out of the Port of London were all going through the city of London.
Oh, so that road was actually built to
alleviate that.
Alleviate that.
Clogged up. The city was completely clogged up. Oh. And then when you get to post-World War II and the gradual, again, going to the change of society, the teenage move from the ton-up, I'll say, to the modernists, aspiration of a young working class lad in 1955 would have been to get a job as a mechanic. It was working class, get a job, basically. By the time you get to the 1960s, those kids from the working class, their aspiration was middle class. And to get a job in the print is a totally different aspiration.
Had to do with the mobility, the motoring, do you think, too?
It has, perhaps to some extent. But it's also a change in society that was so profound post World War II, and which was established by the government in 1945, the Labour government, the socialist, if you like, Labour government, totally transformed the nation. We've unpicked it ever since, and it's no longer like it at all, although it is the society I was born into.
But a whole different world after the war there. And they rebuilt the Ace not too long after the war, because all this was happening. So cars, everything was coming back. There were a lot more motorization. So it was 1949 the Ace was rebuilt. Describe it just a little bit, because it's a quite beautiful place, quite a unique place.
Well, some think of it as Art Deco, which is not quite correct, but I've come to understand that it's a style known as streamline modern. And that's modern.
Streamline modern.
At the end of it, which, as I've already remarked, it is redolent of the great ocean liners of that period. And the two architects or designer people that come to mind are both French, but there's one, and it's a ship called the Normandy, which was France's great ocean liner that during the war is in America, actually, in a dockyard in America, being turned into a transport ship for moving troops. But it caught fire and that was the end of it. But in the Normandy, the sort of dining halls and the rest of it, to my taste of today, all a little OT, all done by designed by a guy called Lalique. And Lalique made crystal
figurines or something.
See, forward on the radiator, you'd have like the Rolls Royce symbol on top of the radiator.
Yeah, of course.
Made crystal glass things for there with lights in there.
Wow.
And those are Art Deco, gorgeous, many of them.
Oh, yeah.
Stunningly beautiful objects. You had another designer bloke called Corbusier, named for his concrete stuff after World War II.
going into the
this,
Bauhaus kind of thing.
yeah, yes, it's Bauhaus, it's Corbusier, it's streamline mod. It's a very particular
It is, yeah.
functional look that's redolent of the decks and the space that you'd sit, the overall space, not the decoration in it, of the ocean liners of the 1930s into the 1950s, as it were. But
Sensory experience there too, isn't it?
yeah, I mean, what adds to that is if you see the Ace, all that glass at the front of the Ace is directly south facing, and it overlooks, it's a little bit higher than the car park in front of the cafe. And in front of that car park, east-west, as it were, you've got the North Circular Road. If you're in the cafe, you can see who's in the car park and who's on the road. And if you're on the road going past, is a direct connection, as it were, there. And in addition to that, once, or perhaps this is just me, old guy speaking now, but if you've travel through London, crowded, busy streets and big buildings and all the rest of it, you get to the Ace and into that car park, and because of that, the topography there of south-facing over roads now, the new, beyond the old road, you've got the new, I call it urban motorway, you've got this fantastic sensation of space in what otherwise is a massive metropolitan area crammed full of 10, 12 million people in this tiddly little space. At the Ace, you've got this feeling of the enormity of space, and that's relaxing, chilling, and the sensation that can get me as the old bloke anyway. When I get down there, this is rather nice.
Yeah.
In the sun.
So that 50s, 60s, that's quite a turbulent time, right? Because everyone's coming back from the war who survived. Were they coming to the cafe, or was it all their kids, or was it both?
Well, that's one of the differences, it seems to me, of the British motorcycle culture and the US motorcycle culture. It is post-war. It's the advent of teenagers who go out and buy the fastest vehicles they can afford. America, that's a car, and it's got a rock and roll soundtrack. Over here, that is a motorbike. It's the rock and roll soundtrack. So that hot rod, American graffiti and motorbikes, it's just one and the same story. So coming back to this different bike cultures either side of the Atlantic, post-war, the British forces came home, sat down, thank fuck that's over. Excuse my language.
It's fine.
The country's bankrupt, we've bled, but thank God it's over. Where Europeans, they're returning soldiers coming out of the POW camps and letting them all go. Their dynamic was rebuild. When the Americans come back, you got the GI Bill, and you could go and study, you could go and do this, go and do that. But ones who had seen, like all soldiers basically, they come home from war, have a parade, have a medal, basically is what society says. And that is a British experience for hundreds of years. It's not an American experience for hundreds of years, but it is a British experience. The Americans got the GI Bill, you can go and progress. But ones who've been proper freaked out with their experience in wartime, who do not fit in society, because they never have, not since the Romans or whatever. If you've been chopping people to pieces,
you don't just go back and fit in.
It does not work.
No.
It never works out. In America, that was absorbed into this great hinterland, and you get out of that, you get the Hells Angels, you get that's it's captured in the Wild Ones. There's a great line in it by Marlon or Johnny, where he's asked, Johnny, what are you rebelling against? And he says, what have you got? Well, that question wouldn't have arisen in 50s with Elvis.
The war just changed this idea of meaning. And I think about the rock and roll too. There's something in the spirit after the war that's inherently rebellious or chaotic or something.
Arguably, it's misfit veterans in America that I'm going to say drive American motorcycle culture. There is the AMA, there is racing, there is, but
I get as Hell's Angels. It's definitely the misfits and the kind of, yeah.
And that gives rise to, if you like, the gang thing. Mm-hmm. And America's got the space where that could unfold. It couldn't and didn't happen here. the attitude to veterans is completely different, either or was completely different. We now have greater shared experience with obviously Korea, Vietnam, and more latterly Iraq, Afghan, and that shared experience will affect our future, what
Yeah.
unfolds into the future. But at that time, they're totally different experiences to draw upon. Again,
So it was mostly
it's
the
an opposite.
younger crowd that was involved in this thing that you described earlier, the mods and the rockers, and they seemed like they were these kind of rebels or people that the older people didn't want around so much. You remember seeing that? That was an early
Oh yeah,
idea of biking for you?
a black leather jacket with one of those on, and he's got one. It all went together. I want one, and football
Ah,
never got.
you never got one. You did. I've seen you. You definitely
No,
eventually.
I didn't mean that. I meant football didn't get me.
Oh,
I'm
football
of the
didn't
age
get
group
you. Yeah,
where
that makes
most of
sense.
my age group football.
I see. But you went for the
But
bikes. Did you have a motorcycle before you had a car?
yes, oh yes, not for long.
Did you wreck
What?
it?
Oh yeah, about a month after I had it, and
Oh
that was the
gosh.
first trip into hospital.
Oh no.
Uh,
Gosh, and
then
you
like
didn't stop.
no,
But
just
you've so you're a rider of motorcycles, we know for sure, but didn't you also were you also a rider of horses, right? Is that do I
yeah,
have that? Yeah?
they fall off of them as well.
Mm. But your first job, you were, is it called a Mountie? Is that the right word? Like where the
It is. That's
police
not
officers
accurate
who
to
ride
say my.
horses?
That's not. It's not accurate to say my first job. No, no,
Okay.
no. I,
Or
I had loads of jobs, and again, it's a peculiarity of my particular age group, of my particular age, not group. It's a very narrow band of people gone through school, and you could get a job almost anywhere as a youngster. So 13, 14, I'm doing stuff, and you couldn't wait to leave school and to get to work, to get money to buy whatever it's going to be. But I wanted to be in the army. I wanted to ride a horse in the army. And the circumstance of my childhood into my very early teens is that living in rural England, not far from London, I could get on horses and just ride around them, hold on the mains and stuff. I was at ease with that, and I loved coming into London. And eventually I came and went and lived with my aunt, just not far from where I'm speaking now in North London, and it's building sites and all that sort of thing with this notion I'm going to join the army. But my mother persuaded me otherwise because of Ireland, because people were being shot on railway stations and who were soldiers. And then I decided I'd join the police and be mounted horses there. And I did that when I was 19.
how in
Yeah.
the world did you end up getting from there to basically being
Well,
part of the rebirth of the A's?
it's very much to do with the interest in bikes and rock and roll, and to the hot rods and whatnot. You know, the 32. I had a 32 three-window Ford,
Oh,
big wheels and all this stuff. I've
okay.
got a 67 SS Chevelle.
Were you
Um,
doing choppers and stuff like this too, or were you
no,
no,
not
okay.
choppers.
Not in that world. In the real
Speed.
classic world. Okay.
Choppers aren't about speed. That's all about, I don't know what it's about. It's a lot of noise, but
It's a
it's
different thing, yeah.
not my
Mhm.
thing. I can see what people do, and I've no friends who are into that kind of stuff, but it's not for
Yeah,
me.
but you were in this very classic yes, like the
I would say
machines.
classic. Yeah, I love the classic machines, but I love speed. Yeah, I've had bike I ride most of the times an RS Street Triple, so it's
Oh,
full face
no wonder you've
lid
had so many
and
close
the
calls.
speed. As I've got older, it's harder and harder to start old
Mhm.
bikes and kickstart. In fact, I've sold them all just before COVID. I had 14 old
You
brick
sold
bikes.
14. Wow.
Yeah, bonkers, completely nuts.
Why did
I
you d
realised,
what was it what made you decide to sell all of them? 14 bikes, you sold all at once? You just decided?
yeah, I stuck them in an auction in the end. Over the years, I've had loads of bikes. I'm no mechanic. I can just about service, say, but I'm not a mechanic. But over time, age knee joints and
No,
holding, you wind up can't start the bloody things and
just gotta
whatnot,
let it go.
crucifying it at pains. And it's this realization just before COVID that actually I'm not Jay Leno. I wish I were, and had huge sheds and people to keep
Mhm.
them working and the rest of it. Said, can
Yeah.
you start that one? We're going to write it out. I'll do it, but I live in one bedroom flat in London. It's not possible. But this is ridiculous. Got to go.
Was that
Sold
a
the
hard
upright.
decision for you or just suddenly became clear?
Having sold them, it's like a therapy. It feels like a therapy now. I've
I
gone
bet.
successfully through the therapy of getting rid of them.
Congratulations. That's really something, actually.
Um, but going back to ACE, that peer group with the shared interest,
In the
I
70s
basically
or the
took,
80s and 90s, you were still riding with a
oh,
motorcycle
good.
group and yeah,
Oh, yeah, yeah,
and
yeah.
doing the cars. Well, you're already part of this community of
Yes.
motoring.
Yeah. And in particular with the bikes, I became Mr. Organizer. And
I imagine.
I organised perhaps 30 of us to go to the Dutch TT. That's where we'll meet, what the route is, giving everybody a route thing. We'll meet here and we're going to meet
You went to Isle of Man? That's a whole other story, but okay.
all over the place. And as Mr. Organizer, we'd go off to meet up at least once a week. And that'd be of an evening, race through London from a rock and roll venue, which was bikes and cars parking all around that as well. Then when that finished, and hardly anybody drank on a bike either, which I've come to realise now, is you buy a bottle of beer, you perhaps drink the neck, but you're not interested in it. And what I've come to understand now is that alcohol kills adrenaline. So you get to know older guys who used to go to the cat. So you'd go to the Ace and you'd sit out on a wall. It's a tyre shop. And with that peer group, it would be, why don't they reopen it?
So it was a kind of automotive place then still. It was like repairing vehicles and stuff. So you could still go and sit and look and think, oh,
you
wouldn't it be
sit and
great?
look at the building and go, oh, it'd be great if. And the key bit is in the tail end of 93 at Triumph Owners National Club, but there are branches all over the place. And regularly go to the West Middlesex Triumph Owners. And guy there who used to go to the Ace and sort of mock me and my friends for our black leather jackets and all that as wannabe rockers, because he's a real one from then, he says to me, knowing I'm Mr. Organizer, I realise now. Do you know when the Ace shut? No, I don't know when it shut. Don't know what you're talking about. Then he said, well, it shut in September 69. Think about it. I said, so what? It shut in 69. What about it? Think about it. Think about it. So he then leaves me there thinking about it. And a few moments later, I've realised that the following year, 94, it'll be 25 years since it had shut. And that is the light bulb. Reunion. I'm going to say, I've got it. Yeah, he says. Yeah, we'll help. So I'll organise that. It's dead easy. Because at that time I was a serving copper. And I knew two other serving coppers, not horsemen, but because of their interest in bikes, who were traffic cops. Yeah. And the traffic unit at that time had a big depot, not a police station, but like a traffic police place, just by Hanger Lane, which is just up the road from the Ace. I'll speak to them because they're going to want this to happen as well. And it's then I'm thinking, this is going to be huge. There'll be thousands come. And it's at that stage, I then go to myself, excuse my language again, fuck me, this is the key to reopening it. This is going to be a big thing. So that all happened that night at Triumph Owners, this conclusion that this is got to happen. You just
couldn't have seen it coming. It just hit you. But once it hit you, it was like you couldn't forget it.
That's what I'm going to do. And it has to be done.
Do you
And
believe in fate?
sorry,
Do you believe in something like fate, like that you were supposed that was what thought was gonna come to you no matter what, or is it more just
I don't know.
chance?
I believe in luck. I would say I believe in it. It's not quite the right term. Um, I accept that it's luck, it's fate. I do subscribe to that. Um, and then it's what you can and can't with it or without it. But it could have been anybody. It could be anybody else because I'm just typical of an age group, of a social group, and it just happened to be me.
I don't think it could have been anybody else. I think that's what I'm trying to get at. It's found the right person, this idea, the person who could actually make it happen.
It is to this day. People say, and on there, people say, "Oh, you never thought this number would turn up." And I'd say, "How do you think all these mobile toilets got here and all those crowd barriers? Do you think I didn't realise what this meant?" It was et
Yeah,
cetera,
that's
et
what I
cetera.
mean. You could see it. It's like it just suddenly you had this kind of clear image of what it would be.
Yeah, and I'm going to say it's because of what I've already described. I know that football's got a following. You put something in it.
That's true.
I'm from this world of motorbikes and motors and rock and roll. Well, I know what that kind of mean to people. So, yeah.
So that reunion, was it just packed with people? Did everyone
Oh,
emerge?
there's at least 12,000 bikes.
Whoa. So you had this reunion, it was a huge hit. I think, as I remember, everyone then really wanted the Ace to reopen. But
Yes.
how and then you just went at it? You just found the money, found the backers, found a way to make it happen? How long did
Yeah.
that take?
Oh, goodness me. Um, well, first off, I had to persuade the people who owned the place to sell
Yeah,
it.
I see.
People who owned it, they'd owned it for a long time. And basically, I browbeat them and then into an agreement with that they couldn't sell it to anybody else for 2 years, made them an offer, and that at the end of that 2 years, I had to put up, I can't remember what it was, I'll say 250,000, but I agreed a purchase price. Now, as that clock started ticking, the one of the occupiers, not the tire fitting company that was in there, but the occupier of a small end of the building and the upper floor, an old guy, he moved out. So it was empty. But he told me before he was serving notice on his landlord and said, I ought to be taking up occupation of that bit. He encouraged me so that nobody else could move in. And as soon as I did get approvals and whatnot, he could start operating in some
Wow.
form or the other. So he added that to that agreement with the owners,
Another piece of the puzzle just fit
another
together.
piece. And then through the peer group and bike rock and roll, whatever, you find out that guy's a dustman, but that guy's an architect.
You
And
had
one of the
everything you
guys,
needed, I
yep,
guess, in the group.
and outline plans we could very kindly done for us. They got submitted and got approved. It took a long while for that, but luckily they got approved just before the end of the 2 year period. And it's at that stage that then it's rush around to try and find money to come up with to buy the blooming thing. But it was relatively easy looking back. Although I had to come up with a deposit, quite a significant deposit.
Another puzzle piece fit. That's what I mean. I know fate's kind of a heavy word, but it just seems like it was the right moment. You took it, everything fit together. This has
Yeah,
been nearly 20 years. It's still going. Not only that, you have franchises, more
yeah,
or less. And now everyone knows the Ace Cafe. Even if you don't know exactly what it is, you hear it, you know it. So it's quite something that out of that little moment of decision, everything fit together. And I didn't know that it was actually also already the motoring community that came together and used their own skills to get it going.
yeah. Well, a chunk would, I would say, perhaps more my world. It sounds a bit gratuitous in some ways, but I'll say working classy types. Then another chunk of that same overall peer group was more arts people, and out of that, it's out of that mix of the two the graphics and the doers and whatnot.
You had all you needed. And Linda, your wife, I hear she's also a big part of the whole
For sure.
cafe world.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
None of it would be possible without her.
She was doing all the communication and everything too.
Yeah.
So you were helping each other from the beginning.
Oh, yeah.
Like them.
Absolutely.
And over these 20 years, you've had so many different events. I couldn't even imagine trying to list them, but maybe it speaks to that thing of home you were talking about. There's this place everybody can come back to. Even over the years, it might seem like everyone's drifted apart and the story has lost the narrative, but then you have this place, this continuous actual place, and it keeps the narrative going and it lets everyone stay connected to it.
A groundswell of that has come out of that peer group of which I just spoke. Not me per se,
but the whole group connected to the beginnings of
that group. It is a vibe of the moment.
I see what you mean. It's its own historical moment in a way.
Yes.
And the ACE is sort of part of that, but also it is also part of creating that. And then you also have this tie to the very beginning of motoring. How do you see the future with all of this? We've been talking about speed and acceleration, but we've also been talking a lot about community and the people around you. And I don't know, when you think about motoring in the future, do you think these same things continue, or how do you see it?
A number of key things have changed. The demographics are changing. The biggest demographic explosion the world has ever known was post-World War II. Now that generation, of which I'm the tail end of, is getting older and older. So you've now got this biggest demographic ever of old people and not enough young people. So that's a huge difference, the implications of which our Western society in particular is having problems grappling with. We don't face up to the fact that we need people. And that's largely because people of my age group who feel they're going to lose what they've got. It's like, and put it bluntly, who's going to look after me in fucking hospital? It ain't going to be an English person. It's going to be a Filipino. It's going to be a Albanian. It's going to be a Nigerian. Get real, I hope.
How do you see that connected to the motoring idea?
How? Mm-hmm. Because amongst the changes, certainly in London, and I believe it's the case across metropolitan Britain, is where we've got massive new estates being built, blocks of flats and whatnot. The densities they're being built at is unprecedented because of changed regulations.
Okay.
The size of a dwelling typically today is a third of the size as laid out in legislation in 1919. And that 1919 legislation was a standard all the way through to at least the mid-80s. So it's only from the mid-80s that we're seeing dwellings get smaller and smaller. A 3-bedroom flat being built today is nothing the size of a 3-bedroom flat built up to the mid-1980s.
Okay.
But more significantly, when it comes to vehicles, for every 3 dwellings, there is only 1 parking space. And using the borough of Brent, where Ace is, or where I live next door in the borough of Barnet, if I've got a flat, or a dwelling rather, and I don't have a parking space with my dwelling, the borough cannot give you a parking space, a permit to park anywhere else in the borough.
Oh, I had no idea.
So motor vehicles are being designed out from the ground up. Now, this is where the unknowns are, I venture, around electric stuff, because electric scooters, they're illegal to use on the public, in the public domain, except in test boroughs. I don't know where that is now, but
so in London streets, they're illegal now?
They're illegal, except in very specific, what they call in test ones, and those scooters have to come from TfL or whoever it is operating the thing. But they're endemic everywhere. Similarly with electric push bikes everywhere. And of course, you can keep those in a flat. So
you don't need the parking space for that.
Yeah. So everything's changing and is designing out private motor vehicles, as I've already said, youngsters are getting these e-vehicle scooters and e-push bike things. So the motor, I'll say, of social change is there, but the outcomes won't be much different from what history shows us, is that they'll want to get together, they'll want to lark about and show off, and there'll be a fashion scene with it, there'll be a music scene with it, and that will just, I believe, continue ad infinitum. Now, when it comes to kids, the experience you have, whether it's kids with car or bike, there's completely different consumption patterns associated with the different groups. And the craft that ACE has to be able to manage into the future is going to be increasingly young electric stuff.
Do you see a way forward? Do you see a way for that to happen that might be still in line with all these things you've talked about that you care about?
I think, that I think is reasonably straight. If the headaches are then thrown in with the workforce headaches, which you may have read about and be aware of, I don't know. But post Brexit, we don't have the workforce.
You don't have the people. All of these issues that you're talking about now, that will be the problem that the motoring community has to solve.
It's not just ACE. This is a societal problem that in this instance, my nation is grappling with.
If you had the perfect future for the ACE, what would it be for you? What do you see? Do you see a nice transition into this electric or other forms of motoring, and perhaps that actually could solve some of these problems you've just discussed? Or would you like to see it just continue as it is?
It cannot continue as it is.
Okay.
And thinking of that, of the consumption of, as much as I love petrol and whatnot, and it won't continue. We're going through agonies of a period of change, but as societies, we've managed to gone through those umpteen times before. And thinking of, I say, if I could afford horses, I'd have indulged in horses. I can't have a stable out here and whatnot.
That also takes energy and fuel and everything too.
Yeah. And I suspect the petrol burning engine will go the same way as horses, in as much it will be two polar extremes of society that will have them. The super rich, two extremes and nothing in the middle. And of course, if you look at photos of cities in 1880s, 1890s, they're stuffed full with traffic jams. It's all horse-drawn. And you go back and look at those same cities 30 years later, they've got traffic jams full of, particularly in America, full of cars. So we've had these transitions before. And I'm sure they've been a headache. What are those stable lads going to do? Get a job in one of these new things called a garage. Except so
you see this as another one of those transitions?
Yeah, that's all it is. And it's one we've got to embrace. We can't, where I happen to live in North London, 4th floor in a block of flats at the top of the hill, I look from one window, I can see across London to the South Downs on a day like we have today, nice clear sunny day. But at dawn and at dusk on nice clear sunny days, you can see the pollution as the sun transitions, it moves through, there's light moves, you can see it. When it gets higher in the sky, you can't see it. But it's not smoke one would associate with chimney stacks and factories, because it's such small, fine stuff. But you can see it. It's as black as can be.
You can't deny it.
No, it's there. You can see it in certain light conditions. And it's killing us. And then we're all in, I don't deny this is either this or the road's going to kill me. I get it.
He's clear-eyed. Maybe not, actually, but yeah. I see what you mean. You're just clear-eyed about the choices that you make.
Yeah. And this is affecting mankind. We've got a route to get away from it. Yeah, there'll be other problems with it, and we'll find out that electricity is, I don't know, makes everybody's hair fall out or something. I don't know what it's going to do, but there will be other problems come along.
But this communal meaning and need that we've been discussing will continue, and we'll have to find a way to
Absolutely.
we'll still find
Yeah.
ways to address that
Yeah.
even as
The
we
Romans had problems with youngsters racing through the Forum. That's 2,000 years ago. That's documented and documented ever since. There's been for London, it's been the London apprentices. It's the same age group throughout history. They want to
Mhm.
go fast. They want to whiz about, and they want to be with their mates. And yeah, I trust that I and those with me are going to be competent enough to ensure the ace is able to be that place into the future.
Well, I think it will be, and it'll be interesting to see how it changes too, and how it also remains this narrative of the heritage of that change over time from the very beginning to wherever we end up. Well, thank you so much for your time today. It's been really nice to talk to you, and
It's been
I've
really
learned a
rather
lot.
therapeutic for
It
me.
has been therapeutic. That's a good word for it. Maybe that's the new motoring.
Yes.
Some kind of therapeutic motoring.
Cool.
Yeah.